The secret to empowerment is responsibility, taking responsibility, owning responsibility. Owning responsibility isn't the same thing as taking blame. It's about finding your responsibility is finding your power in any situation. The analogy I use is if I'm in a car accident. If I'm parked at a red light and a car comes from behind and smashes me, 0% of that is my fault. But there's a lot of that has now become my responsibility. I got to do the paperwork for the insurance. I got to go to the auto body shop. That's my
You got to go
responsibility.
to the
Feeling
chiropractor.
sorry
Yeah.
from
You got
all
to do all
that.
the
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I got to do those things.
Yeah.
No one's gonna be like, well, it wasn't your fault. Let's carry you there.
Yeah.
I had to do those things. It's not my fault, but it's my responsibility. That's the big way that we need to focus on life. A lot of this is not going to be our fault, but it's still our responsibility. And the thing is, when we focus on where our responsibility is, that's where our power is. And I think that's the important part in all of this. You know, whether it becomes from an activist standpoint, whether it becomes from just a personal standpoint. And this is really important when it comes to how we feel about ourselves, because when we feel empowered, we're going to feel better and we can take action. You know, action creates motivation. Motivation doesn't create action. We have to get started. You have to go to the gym and start working out to feel like you want to work out. Because most of the time you don't feel like you want to work out because our brain is here to protect us and our brain just wants us to eat, sleep, and procreate. Tying up your shoes and going for a run doesn't fall under those three categories. So it's going to try to talk you out of it. You got to go and start doing it. And then you start building this momentum. And it's the same thing in the situation where you realize, hey, there's a lot of entities and people in society that are making a lot of money off me, feeling sorry for myself, having no resilience, chasing convenience, and isolating myself from everybody else. That's the village that we live in, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get into that victimhood or into that self-pity, there's no impetus for change, right? It now becomes an alibi for your personal failures. Now it sort of repaints, let's say, negative traits and actions as positive ones. And I think as you were saying, with the negative comments, like that's going to get way more engagement. There's going to be way more social currency. There's going to be way more attention from other like-minded individuals that are going to say, "Good for you for," And this is sort of you were talking about vulnerability before. This is what I've observed, this sort of false vulnerability. There's vulnerability, there's authentic sharing, and then there's like, here's my pity party version, number 642, and so you see these individuals who now that becomes part of their identity. I used to see this a lot when I was still in clinical practice. You would have there would be certain diagnoses that were given, and then it was like my disease, they would sort of, it was like my fibromyalgia, my chronic fatigue, it would be this personalization. You could almost see the label of the disease being integrated into the psyche of the individual. So maybe you can parse apart for us the difference between self-pity and self-compassion, because, we do have to have compassion for ourselves. We do have to be able to recognize, hey, like maybe all these crazy, maybe I'm just tired. Like maybe I need a nap. Maybe I need a couple days off of work. Maybe I have been working too hard or pushing the finite limits of my matter, right? How do we parse between self-pity, which has sort of a very quick spiral into that victimhood that we were taught, that, I was just mentioning, and self-compassion? How do we parse apart the two?
I think compassion will still result in action. I think it'll just be action in a different direction. I think it's not us just doing in pain. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to finish a book and I have a deadline, but, I can feel my brain turn to mush. Or, recently, about a month ago, for the first time, I got COVID. So I had never, during, the OG
You
strains, I somehow
avoided it
avoided
for
it.
3 years. Good on you, sir. That's awesome.
Yeah, I avoided it for 3 years. And then I think the thing was, when I got it, you know, the one thing that I had never thought about or experienced was that brain fog. I had never experienced that. And then this put me in a situation where it's like, I also write scripts for TV and film, and I was pitching to a major TV network that week. And I was like, there's no way I can, like, this is a once in a lifetime experience. There's no way I can skip this, and blame it on COVID. But I had never experienced brain fog before. It felt like I was just constantly in need of a coffee to just like snap out of it. But all the coffee in the world wasn't getting me to snap out of it. And it was this really interesting where I had to, it was other people's compassion, my team that I was working with, two different production teams, like, no, no, we're canceling the meeting. Like, we're canceling this. You can't force your brain to work in a time that it's not working. You start to realize, like, hey, like, for the next 6 days, I'm just gonna play on my PlayStation. Like, there's nothing else I can really do. Like, I have to stay away from other people. There's really not, I can't go to the gym. I can't go to jujitsu. I can't do all the things that I enjoy doing. I'm gonna walk my puppy and play video games until things start to feel better. And it's like this idea of just like this is I know what this is, and it's paying attention to it. But it's also like this is when we procrastinate. Procrastination is telling us something. We have to take a step back and listen to it and be like, well, how would I take care of somebody? And especially with all of us that grew up with so much tough love and so much sucking up. And again, this isn't a knock to our parents' generation. They knew what they knew. Emotional intelligence is an intelligence for a reason, and we all have limits to it. We have to be we're reparenting ourselves, and we
Yeah.
have to be able to like, look, like today is not the day you sprint. Today's the day you rest. And you look at the animal kingdom, all these animals do, when they hunt, they sprint and then they rest and they just lay down for hours and do absolutely nothing. But for some reason, we think we have to always be on, and I love the quote that we are human beings, not human doings. Our purpose is to be, not to do. So for me, the self-compassion comes in this understanding of that. Like, I can't do it all. And I'll be completely honest, my most compassionate moments came from the words of other people. I have a friend who's hyper productive, works harder than any human I've ever known. And during the pandemic, I was talking about how I didn't feel like I was doing enough. And they said, look, your only job at this time is to stay alive. Like, that's your job. Nothing else is your job. But I was thinking years ago when we used to just kind of be on our hustles together and we kind of kept each other accountable, who was working, who wasn't working, making little sly comments if somebody wasn't getting their work done. But it's like, they've grown up too. And they realize like, no, like life isn't just about, you know, making all the time. It's okay to take a breather. It's okay to take a rest. And even recently today, a friend of mine who's a former NFL player talked about taking naps in between practices. So going from 8 hours of sleep a day to almost 12 by adding these naps in, because that's the best way to recover from something. And again, professional athletes, they work out for a living and they do some crazy stuff, so they have to rest extra as well. And I think that importance is, learning to rest and not viewing that time as a waste. Rest is important. As a creative, as an artist, I have to walk. I have to experience life. I have to have these, I have to learn. I have to, absorb. I have to sponge. This may not look like work, but it took me a long time to realize that this is part of my work. I only made it this far because I took the time to do that kind of stuff. So the self-compassion is really giving yourself what you need, not what you want temporarily, and seeing how it benefits you in the long run. And it goes back to your core values. So often we think we have to be doing more because we don't have our core values expressed. So we're just comparing ourselves to everybody else. But when we start to understand what our core values are, I think it's really important. There's a great interview with J. Cole where he talks about how he used to be jealous of Drake, two very big rappers in the world. He goes, then I started to realize that the stuff that he's doing is the stuff I ever wanted to do. And if I wanted to do what he did, I would have to take a whole different path, and that wouldn't have been who I was. Because then my jealousy melted away, and then I took the pressure off myself. Because now I got to be me, and I'm letting him be him. And I think there's a beauty to that, which is the better we know ourselves, the less we can compare ourselves to other people. And you can't be yourself if you don't know yourself.
Yeah.